American submarines turned the Pacific into a graveyard for Japanese shipping, rewriting the rules of naval warfare. But behind their deadly success lay brutal risks and staggering losses. Today we'll uncover the three most legendary U.S. submarines of World War II and reveal why one of them never made it home. 3. USS Balao, SS-285. Commissioned in February 1943, the Balao-class submarines were specifically designed to counter the increasingly sophisticated Japanese anti-submarine measures that had been claiming American lives throughout the Pacific campaign. While her predecessor, the Gato class, could dive to 300 feet, the Balao could plunge to an incredible 400 feet, with some later models in her class reaching depths of 600 feet. That extra depth meant the difference between life and death when enemy destroyers were dropping depth charges overhead. The engineering marvel that was the USS Balao stretched 311 feet and 9 inches in length, with a beam of 27 feet and 3 inches and a draft of 16 feet and 10 inches. She displaced 1,526 tons on the surface and 2,424 tons when submerged, making her a formidable presence, whether above or below the waterline. Her 4 Fairbanks Morse diesel engines could propel her at 20.25 knots on the surface, while her high-speed electric motors provided 8.75 knots underwater. But speed wasn't her only advantage in the deadly game of cat and mouse played beneath the Pacific. The Balao carried a devastating arsenal designed to cripple the Japanese Empire's maritime lifelines. Her armament consisted of 24 torpedoes distributed among 10 torpedo tubes, 6 positioned in the bow and 4 in the stern. Each 21-inch torpedo was a ship killer, capable of breaking the back of even the largest enemy vessels. Her 5-inch deck gun could engage surface targets when stealth wasn't required, while her 40mm and 20mm anti-aircraft guns provided protection against aerial threats. With a crew of up to 81 brave souls, including 10 officers and 71 enlisted men, she represented a floating city of warriors capable of remaining on patrol for 75 days straight, covering an incredible 11,000 nautical miles at 10 knots surfaced. When submerged, she could operate for 48 hours at 2 knots, giving her crew the endurance needed for extended stalking of enemy convoys. But here's something that will blow your mind about submarine warfare. What do you think happened when a submarine crew had to stay underwater for days at a time in a metal tube with 80 other men? The reality was both fascinating and terrifying. Crews developed an almost supernatural ability to move silently, communicating through hand signals and whispers that became their own language of survival. The air inside the submarine became increasingly toxic from diesel fumes, battery gases, and human waste, creating an atmosphere so poisonous that men would sometimes hallucinate, seeing things that weren't there or hearing voices from home. The psychological pressure was so intense that when depth charges exploded nearby, some sailors would crack completely, requiring their shipmates to physically restrain them to prevent panic that could doom the entire crew. Officers carried sidearms not just for combat, but to maintain order if crew members broke under the unbearable stress of underwater warfare. Now, coming back to Balao, during her 10 war patrols across the vast Pacific theater, the USS Balao earned 9 battle stars, each one representing successful combat operations against the Japanese Empire. Her 4th patrol became legendary when she executed daring rescues of downed U.S. airmen off Palau, all while dodging Japanese depth charges in waters crawling with enemy vessels hunting for American submarines. The Balao and her sister ships epitomized what submariners called the silent service, conducting not only combat patrols but also photo reconnaissance missions that provided crucial intelligence about Japanese positions and defenses. These submarines would creep close to enemy-held islands, using their periscopes to photograph harbors, beach defenses, and troop concentrations, information that would prove invaluable for upcoming Allied amphibious assaults. 2. USS Gato, SS-212. The USS Gato was the lead boat of the Gato class, a revolutionary design that entered service in 1941, just as America was preparing for the storm that would engulf the Pacific. What made the Gato truly revolutionary wasn't her size or firepower. It was her design philosophy that represented a complete departure from previous American submarine concepts. She was the first truly American submarine, setting standards for construction, operation, and tactical employment that would be followed throughout the war and beyond. At 311 feet and 9 inches long, with a beam of 27 feet and 3 inches, and a draft of 16 feet and 10 inches, the Gato was identical in length to her successor, the Balao, but her impact on submarine warfare was immeasurably greater than her dimensions suggested. Her displacement of 1,525 tons surfaced and 2,424 tons submerged made her the largest submarine class America had ever built, reflecting a new understanding that size meant survivability, range, and hitting power. The Gato's propulsion system represented cutting-edge technology for its time. Her 4 General Motors Winton diesel engines, each developing tremendous power, could push her massive hull to 21 knots on the surface, making her faster than many surface warships of the era. When submerged, her dual electric motors per shaft provided 9 knots underwater, giving her the speed needed to pursue fleeing enemies or escape pursuing destroyers. With a diving depth rated to 300 feet, the Gato could escape most surface threats by diving deeper than previous American submarines could manage. This depth capability, while seemingly modest by later standards, was revolutionary at the time and gave American submarine commanders a crucial tactical advantage over their Japanese counterparts. The Gato's armament was both versatile and devastating. 10 21-inch torpedo tubes, 6 forward and 4 aft, could unleash 24 torpedoes against enemy targets, each one capable of sinking ships up to cruiser size. Her deck gun, varying from 3-inch to 5-inch depending on the refit, provided surface firepower for engaging smaller vessels or finishing off damaged targets. Anti-aircraft weapons, including 20mm cannons and 50-caliber machine guns, protected her from aerial attacks during surface operations. But the Gato's crew complement of approximately 60 men, including 6 officers and 54 enlisted personnel, was where her true strength lay. During her 13 war patrols across the vast Pacific, the USS Gato earned 13 battle stars, an unprecedented achievement that spoke not only to her crew's exceptional skill and courage, but also to the submarine's remarkable reliability and effectiveness. One of the Gato's most remarkable and daring missions occurred during her 5th patrol when she approached the Japanese-held island of Bougainville to conduct a special operation that demonstrated the incredible versatility of American submarines. Under cover of complete darkness, she surfaced near enemy-controlled beaches and successfully landed, and later evacuated Australian commandos and civilian refugees who had been trapped behind enemy lines. The Gato-class submarines, led by their namesake, were ultimately responsible for sinking over 300 Japanese ships, totaling millions of tons of enemy shipping. This underwater campaign crippled Japan's ability to supply its far-flung island garrisons, transport raw materials to the home islands, and maintain the maritime empire that was essential to their war effort. The Gato's legacy extended beyond combat effectiveness to include technological innovation. Her partial double hull design provided added safety and survivability that would be incorporated into all subsequent American submarine classes. Her range of 1,100 nautical miles at 10 knots surfaced allowed her to patrol vast areas of the Pacific without requiring forward bases or frequent refueling, giving American submarine commanders unprecedented strategic flexibility. But speaking of psychological pressure and dangerous tactics, there's one submarine maneuver that was so dangerous, so insane, that it had a 50% fatality rate among the crews who attempted it. Wonder what this deadly maneuver was, and why submarine commanders kept ordering it despite the horrific odds? That deadly submarine tactic was called the down-the-throat shot, and it represented the ultimate test of a submarine commander's nerves and skill. When a submarine was detected on the surface and an enemy destroyer was charging straight at them at full speed, some commanders would make the incredible decision to fire torpedoes directly at the approaching warship's bow, rather than diving to escape. The physics of this maneuver were terrifying. The torpedo had to be fired at exactly the right moment, with perfect timing and incredible nerve, while the enemy destroyer was bearing down at speeds exceeding 30 knots. The margin for error was virtually non-existent. Fire too early and the destroyer could turn to avoid the torpedo. Fire too late and there wouldn't be time for the torpedo to arm and detonate. Miss the shot entirely and the destroyer would ram and sink the submarine, crushing the hull like an eggshell and killing everyone aboard instantly. Hit the target, however, and the submarine would survive while the destroyer would either sink or be so damaged it couldn't continue the attack. The tactic had approximately a 50% failure rate, meaning that half the submarines that attempted it were destroyed. But in desperate situations when diving wasn't an option and escape was impossible, desperate commanders made this ultimate gamble with their crew's lives. 1. USS Tang, SS-306. Commissioned in October 1943 and commanded by the legendary Richard O'Kane, a submarine warfare genius who had learned his deadly craft under the famous Dudley Morton aboard the USS Wahoo. The USS Tang became the most successful U.S. submarine of the entire war. Her statistics are absolutely mind-blowing and represent the pinnacle of submarine warfare effectiveness. 33 Japanese ships sunk, totaling over 116,000 tons of enemy shipping destroyed in just 5 combat patrols. But her story ends in a way that no one could have predicted, a twist of fate so cruel and ironic that it defies belief. Built at Mare Island Naval Shipyard in California, the Tang incorporated all the hard-won lessons learned from earlier submarine designs and represented the absolute cutting edge of 1943 submarine technology. Her specifications were identical to other Balao-class submarines, 311 feet 9 inches long, with a beam of 27 feet 3 inches and a draft of 16 feet 10 inches. She displaced 1,526 tons on the surface and 2,424 tons when submerged, making her a formidable underwater combatant. The Tang was capable of diving to her rated depth of 400 feet, but during training maneuvers, she was tested to an incredible 612 feet, demonstrating the robust construction and safety margins built into her design. This extra depth capability would prove crucial during her combat patrols, when Japanese depth charge attacks became increasingly accurate and deadly. Her propulsion system consisted of 4 Fairbanks Morse diesel engines that provided 20.25 knots on the surface, while electric motors gave her 8.75 knots submerged. With a range of 11,000 nautical miles and 10 knots surfaced, she could patrol for 75 days straight, remaining submerged for up to 48 hours at 2 knots when tactical situations demanded extended underwater operations. The Tang's crew consisted of 87 highly trained submariners, including 10 officers and 77 enlisted men, each one a specialist in the deadly art of underwater warfare. But what made the Tang truly special wasn't her specifications or her crew size. It was the aggressive tactical doctrine and exceptional leadership that her commander, Richard O'Kane, brought to every combat situation. She carried 24 torpedoes distributed among 10 torpedo tubes, 6 forward and 4 aft. Each 21-inch torpedo capable of sinking the largest enemy vessels. Her 5-inch deck gun provided surface firepower, while 40mm and 20mm anti-aircraft guns protected her during surface operations and transit. But beyond her weapons, the Tang carried something even more deadly, a crew trained to perfection in the art of submarine combat, and a commander whose tactical brilliance would make him a legend. The action that truly established the Tang's legendary status occurred on February 17, 1944, during a convoy attack that demonstrated the incredible skill and nerve of her crew. Approaching a heavily escorted Japanese convoy, the Tang launched a torpedo attack that immediately brought devastating retaliation from enemy destroyers. Depth charges began exploding all around the submarine as she dove beneath the surface, seeking the safety of deeper water. But O'Kane wasn't finished. Instead of fleeing the scene like most submarine commanders would have done, he ordered the Tang to remain in the area, hiding beneath the depth charge barrage and waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. When the Japanese ships thought they had driven off their attacker, the Tang surfaced and delivered the killing blow to a 6,800-ton freighter, sending her to the bottom. This type of aggressive, almost reckless tactics became the Tang's trademark and would culminate in her third war patrol, which military historians consider one of the most devastating submarine actions of the entire Second World War. The Tang also excelled at what submariners called lifeguard duty, rescuing downed American airmen from waters controlled by Japanese forces. These missions required surfacing in broad daylight in enemy-controlled areas, making the submarine vulnerable to air attack while crew members pulled pilots from the water. The Tang saved numerous American airmen during her patrols, adding search and rescue to her impressive list of accomplishments. But here's where the Tang's story takes the most devastating and ironic turn. On October 24, 1944, during her fifth patrol off the treacherous waters near Taiwan, the Tang was conducting a night surface attack on a Japanese convoy that had been identified as carrying critical supplies to Japanese forces in the Philippines. She had already fired 23 of her 24 torpedoes during this patrol, achieving devastating results against enemy shipping and adding to her already legendary reputation. Commander O'Kane, standing on the bridge in the darkness, ordered the firing of the Tang's final torpedo. This would be torpedo number 24, the last weapon in her arsenal, and O'Kane intended to make it count. The crew had loaded and armed the torpedo with the same precision they had demonstrated throughout their combat patrols. Everything was perfect. Everything was routine. Everything was exactly as it had been dozens of times before. The torpedo was fired, and the crew watched through their periscope from the bridge as it streaked through the dark water towards its target, a large Japanese transport loaded with troops and supplies. But then something went terribly, horribly wrong. The torpedo made what submariners call a circular run, a catastrophic malfunction where the torpedo's guidance system fails, causing it to curve back in a deadly arc towards the submarine that fired it. The Tang's own torpedo, the 24th and final weapon of her last patrol, was now heading straight back at her. The torpedo struck the Tang's aft torpedo room with a devastating explosion that tore through her pressure hull. Water began flooding into the submarine immediately, and she started her final dive towards the bottom of the Taiwan Strait. Of the 87 men aboard the Tang at the moment of the explosion, only 9 survived the sinking. These 9 men, including Commander O'Kane, managed to escape from a depth of 180 feet using a device called the Momsen lung, an early form of emergency breathing apparatus. The escape represented the only documented successful use of the Momsen lung in combat during the entire war. The device was experimental, unreliable, and had never been proven in actual combat conditions. Yet these 9 submariners, in the most desperate circumstances imaginable, used it to ascend 180 feet through dark water while under enemy fire. The Tang received 4 battle stars and 2 Presidential Unit citations for her service, recognition that barely scratched the surface of her contributions to the Allied victory in the Pacific. Her legacy lives on at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, where visitors can experience the claustrophobic reality of submarine warfare through immersive exhibits that help modern audiences understand the incredible sacrifices made by the men of the silent service. These 3 submarines fundamentally changed the course of history by proving that control of the seas could be won from beneath the surface. Each represented a crucial evolution in underwater warfare technology and tactics that built upon the lessons learned from the previous class. But here's my question for you. Which of these 3 submarines do you think had the greatest impact on the outcome of World War II? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories from the depths of history that shaped our world.